Welcome. In Unexplored 2, you play this creature, which is the Wayfarer, and you travel through a giant, fully procedurally generated world. Sorry, I forgot to start the time, which I need to do because I don't have a lot of minutes, and now even less. You visit all sorts of places and scary dungeons, and it's your typical fantasy setting. So when we started to talk about music, we obviously thought of orchestral music, the typical fantasy choirs, large orchestra. We made the game with 4.5 people. We had a budget basically for 3.5 people, and we had a couple of freelancers indeed as well. Sorry, I almost forgot. But this was no way feasible, not even close. Also, a smaller orchestra in a studio wouldn't be possible. So obviously, we went for a different solution because we did want the orchestral sound, and this will come as no surprise to you. We went for a virtual orchestra. And today I want to show you a bit of how a composer uses the virtual orchestra to make music that sort of sounds like it was recorded by a choir and an orchestra. And I spotted a couple of composers in the room. They will definitely hear the difference. Maybe your gamers will not hear the difference between a virtual orchestra and a real orchestra. I always like real orchestras better, and we've got a cello playing, a real cello on the soundtrack as well. But hey, if we don't have enough money to pay ourselves properly, we don't have enough money to hire 100 musicians. So I'm going to start with a few examples of a violin section. And I want to clear up something about virtual instruments. You've got two kinds of virtual instruments. You've got synthesizers, where the entire sound is being synthesized. So there's no real-world recording anywhere. The virtual instruments that I use have their basis in actual recordings of the instruments. So in the next example, we're going to listen to, it's on the one hand a recording of 16 violin players, and it's being sort of blended together, the notes are blended together by very smart software. Because obviously the players don't know which melody I'm going to write. So you take the samples, the real-world samples, and you blend them together through software. That's basically what a virtual instrument is. And I thought I was being smart by putting all this in a movie instead of slides, but I always have to, I forget the next bit. Anyway, my name is Matthijs Dierckx. I'm the composer and audio designer for Unexplored 2, a game that didn't launch very well, to be very honest, but we do have some real fans who are playing the game for hundreds and hundreds of hours. And today I want to talk not to composers, because they're not going to hear anything new, but to developers, and try and show you a bit about the process of making orchestral music for indie games. So this is the screen I'm staring at basically all day. This is a program called Cubase, and I'm gonna, and I hope we can have the sound in a minute. The little bars are basically the notes, and I'm sending the notes to the plugin, and the plugin is playing the violin samples. This is a violin section of 16 violin players. And the first bit is just, like, play this note for that amount of time. And then the second one, I'm telling the virtual players to start with a low bow pressure, so low volume, and then increase a bit and then decrease at the end. And then the third example is me telling the instrument to blend the notes together. And especially in Japan, this is very popular in game music, where you have the so-called glissando effect, where the violin player slides their finger across the snare to blend notes together. So this is just the basic. And this is with a bit more dynamic. And this is blended a bit more together. And these were all so-called legato notes, so the long notes. But obviously, the samples aren't just, like long notes. They're also with tremolo and more vibrato and short notes, or even thrills. And the thrills, probably from horror movies. And there's this other way of playing a violin, which is by plucking the snares, which is called pizzicato. I think you. And then you have the short notes, the staccato. You know the word staccato. It's not blended notes, really sharp. And this is, in my opinion, where most string libraries, most virtual string instruments excel, because they get really close to a real orchestra. And the next phrase is played even with shorter notes, called spiccato, anyway. And this is a bit of a phrase of a song I will go into in a minute. So you'd be hard-pressed to find some gamers who would hear the difference when they're playing between such a violin section and the actual one. I'm not saying it necessarily is realistically, I'm saying it's natural. And with natural, I mean it doesn't distract the player from playing the game, because that's a really fake instrument. You don't only have violins, obviously. We have, basically what we do, we load up a lot of instruments. So on the left side of your screen, you see all the instruments, the virtual instruments I use, and those are woodwinds, brass, percussion, and strings, and more strings and more strings. I think I owe 6 or 7 string libraries. Some people like to buy clothes. I like to buy different kinds of violins and cellos and stuff like that. And they're quite expensive, to be honest. But you use a selection of the instruments you have. You don't go, write lines for hundreds of instruments. For this next song, I use not too many. This is called Ever After, and it's the game over song of Unexplored 2. In Unexplored 2, you die, and when you die, you don't get to quick load or anything. Your character just goes away, and you may start with a new character in the same world, or choose to create a new world. So I wanted this to be a bit upbeat, because it needed to celebrate what you've achieved, but also to give the player sort of a musical encouragement to continue on his next run. And I wanted it to be big, a bit epic, because the rest of the soundtrack is a bit, especially in game, a bit toned down, and I wanted this to be, well, big, epic maybe. And the best way of making something big is to use a choir. So this is where I started. It's a choir of a couple of men and women, and they're singing some phrases, but not too articulate, and it sounds something like this. Sort of okay, but I wanted them to sound a bit more energetically, so I kept that choir and I doubled it with the same choir, but now they're singing more energetically with more force, and it sounds like this when we combine it. This is no chiptune anymore, so you can see where your choices diverge, so to speak. There's nothing wrong with chiptune, but sometimes chiptune just doesn't match the feel of the game that you want to communicate. And finally, we added a Bulgarian singer with some more articulated phrases to emphasize the melody. But this is just, like the choirs and the chords and the melody. I wanted to have it some rhythm. I didn't want to use percussion, mainly because I suck at writing for percussion. It's something I really am trying to get better at. So it's like I tried it, but it sort of ruined everything. So I decided to put in the rhythm using strings. And these are the double basses, so the really big, standing, oversized violins, and the slightly smaller the cellos, the celli. If you don't know what a cello is, I kapach, because that's such a beautiful instrument. Combine this with this. But it's not enough, so I added. I wrote a couple of lines for the viola section and violin section. So you go basically you go from low to mid to the high register, and that sounds like this. And when you combine it with the choir. It's getting there, but I wanted to be even bigger, more epic, and what's more epic than brass? This is a French horn, by the way. A French horn you must know from The Lord of the Rings. That's basically everything is, not everything, but a lot in The Lord of the Rings is French horn, and I really love that sound. Not for this track too much. These are trumpets, trombones, a lower brass. And a little disclaimer, I didn't write this piece to be ever heard on its own, but I'll let you hear it anyway. It's not very beautiful, but so this is the... So when we put it all together, I think it sounds big, bigger than you would expect from, or epic, or how you want to call it, bigger than you would expect from an indie game with the budget of ours. I'll let it play out, and that will be the end of my talk as well. Again, there's nothing wrong with different kinds of music other than orchestral, but just bear in mind that it is possible, even for indie games, to have an orchestral sounding soundtrack, although it takes a little more time to get an orchestral track right than your average chiptune synthesizer all those kinds of music. Anyway, this is everything combined. That was loud. Well, I don't know if we have any time for questions. I've got one last remark. I'm for hire. And also buy my book, which will be released at the end of this month.
Amazing, great.
Thank you.
Insane how big you make it sound like with only you, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just me, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So he's up for questions. We actually got this amazing microphone box, so just raise your hands and I'll throw it to you. So, any questions? There's one. I'll throw it.
Challenge is to catch
I'll
it.
also catch it.
You mentioned it took you longer. I just want to know how long.
What I meant is that on average, an orchestral track takes longer because, as I showed you in the beginning, you have for just one line of a violin, you have to, like, tell them how to play, what to play, and there's so many variables to make it sound great. I would say, in my experience, but that may differ for other composers, I would say it takes everywhere from 50% to 75% extra in time.
Okay.
Compared
so more or
to
less the double.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Sorry.
Another question to the left. I won't throw it this far. There you go.
Can you hear me? Oh. I can hear me. So it seems like it's beautiful, by the way, but how do you know when to stop? Because to me it seems like it's very easy to get lost in the process and just keep adding more beautiful things.
Oh, that's a very good question, and I don't have an answer. It's hell sometimes because for this song, this to me was an important track because people would hear it over and over again, and especially in the worst moments because they just died in the game. And I think I literally made like 20, 30 versions that I did put in the game, all with, at the end, definitive, use this one, no, this is the one, etc., etc. And it's, my trick is this, when I walk through Amsterdam, I put on the track, and when I'm not distracted by anything that I'm listening to, then it's done. And there's also a different method, which is, okay, I just got like 10 hours worth of time for this track, and it needs to be done in 10 hours, and then you just scale down the complexity of it.
Nice, thank you very much.
Any more questions? I got a question.
Oh.
Any new learnings that you got through this whole process that you will bring to your next projects?
Oh, so many.
Top three.
First of all, I suck at mixing and mastering. It's very difficult. I don't have a formal education, and my ears aren't very well trained, so it takes me a lot of time to. The composing is like 50%, and then mastering and editing is another 50%. And I think I would set up my template differently to reduce that time, and I would and that's probably more relevant to you guys, which is it took 4 or 5 months for me and the rest of the team to click on the music, because at first they were not happy with what I was composing, and I didn't understand them, and they just keep sending me examples of synthesizer music. No synthesizers, but they didn't mean use synthesizers. They meant we want this kind of atmosphere, we want this kind of melody, and it took really some time. But especially, and then I'll stop talking. Especially the art director hated my music in the beginning, and in the end, now he's my biggest fan. So it takes some time for a team and a composer to come together.
Nice, cool. Yeah, great. Thanks, Matthijs.